for being introduction. We'll see if I live up to it. And so today we're talking about Bhagavad Gita, verse 244. Now, this is a fascinating part of the Gita. Chapter 2 is really all you need because the whole Gita is summarized in there. So if you read chapter 2 and you absolutely get it, you have the Gita. Of course, few of us absolutely get it. We have more questions. Arjuna begins chapter 3. Even though chapter 2 tells him everything, he begins chapter 3, curiously, with a question. Oh, and why did you urge me to engage in ghastly warfare? Do you think that intelligence is better than me being food of work? So even after it was all explained in a summary form, Arjuna wasn't satisfied and he asked more questions. So this is the way we learn. So even though everything is in chapter 2, it's all not going to gel right away. It's a process. Prabhupada one time, 2 times, 3 times, turns out 150 times said something. Now, if Prabhupada said something 150 times, I counted, at least 150, then we might think he meant it. And what he said was this, and it's relevant, very relevant for this chapter. He said, Krishna consciousness is a gradual process. Now, all of us want to read the Gita, chant Hare Krishna, maybe get initiated and consider ourselves completely advanced, but it's a gradual process. The important point for all of us in our own life is which direction we're going. And that was Prabhupada's point. If you're going in the right direction, you're going to get there. And if you're going the wrong direction, you won't get there. I remember one time we had this Professor Kapshan visiting at New Raman Reti. And he was a interesting fellow. He was a professor of psychology, if I remember, some time ago. And he came up to discuss with Hridayananda Maharaj, this is in the 80s, certain things. Now, Kapshan had on his wrists all these medical bands. He had all kinds of problems. So if he ever was found fainted on the side of the road, they can see all these different medical things, the conditions he had, so they know how to treat him. But he was trying to argue philosophically that sense gratification will bring enlightenment. So it was a kind of interesting debate, but a very nice fellow. I mean, he was very pleasant. And I was thinking, has all these illnesses, he could die at any moment, and he has all these warnings on his wrist. It was such a strange thing. And then one devotee took him away and he wanted to really discuss with him. So he got on the highway. The professor came from Miami. So he got on the highway and he was so engaged in discussion, he turned north. Of course, Miami is south of Gainesville. So he drove for a full hour. And then when he got to Georgia, he realized he was going the wrong direction. And it made a real impression on me. One, boy, can that guy be spaced out. I won't mention the devotee's name. But 2, that's a real metaphor for spiritual life. The main thing is going the right direction. It may be slow. It may be fast. In our introduction, Dixon you mentioned that you're now isolated. I think you said Cincinnati and been away from devotee association for a year and you really want to get back to it. The key is when we're put in these difficult positions, the key for our spiritual life is which direction are we going? That's the test. Then there's a second test. It's a good test. Now, when you've had a good dinner, no one has to tell you if you're full or not. So you can tell looking inward, yes, I'm going in the right direction. You know it. So that's that's what's going on. This is the context. So again, chapter 2 has everything you need to know, yet you will surely have more questions. So now we'll work up to this. Krishna says in the prior verse, men of small knowledge are very much attached to the flowery words of the Vedas, which recommend various fruitive activities for elevation to heavenly planets, result in good birth, power, and so forth. Being desirous of sense gratification, opulent life, they say there's nothing more than this. Now, these are people attached to the Vedas. Every scripture of the world, I don't care if it's the Vedic scriptures, the Jewish scriptures, Christian, Islamic, Taoist, Confucius, you go on and on. Every scripture of the world has this issue, and the Vedas are no different whatsoever. And it has this issue that there's something good and something bad found in all these religious literatures, Vedas included. Now, let's pause for a moment. Think about this. What's the good part and what's the bad part? Anybody want to venture a guess? All religious scriptures, Vedas are no different, have the same problem. Anybody want to guess what's wrong with it? I'll give you a hint. Vedavyas, who compiled the Vedic literature, and this is in the beginning of the Bhagavatam, he also got bewildered by the same problem. And his guru, Narada Muni, had to put his head on straight. And he's a compiler of the Vedas. They all have this problem. And I've studied in my years, many religions. I've studied many things. Before I was a devotee, I did fairly comprehensive studies. As a devotee, I do a lot of comparative religious work, and they all suffer this problem. Yes. Yes. Gail, you want to say something? Go on, Gail.
I thought his hand was up, so it's okay.
Oh, but you go first, Gail.
Gail should go first. I was trying to get help.
Gail, what do you think?
I think maybe scriptures might focus too much on how people can try to become happy in a materialistic way, and they don't maybe steer people's attention toward how wonderful it would be to have a loving relationship with God instead. Something like that.
Gail, you gave a very good answer. I'm going to reframe it slightly, but you gave a very good answer. The flowery language of the Vedas, in Sanskrit, the term is called fruitive activities or karma kanda. And what this means is it's treating religious experience the same way you would treat Amazon.com. Now, what do you do with Amazon.com? You make a deposit, your credit card, and if you're in the right place, the next day you get a package delivered to your door that fills your desires. So every religion has karma kanda. You do some pious activities, and then from these pious activities, you can get some result if you do it right and carefully. Unfortunately, most people don't realize the result may come this life or next life. Just like you order from Amazon, if you're in the right place, it will come the next day. But if it's sent through the postal service, it may take a few years to come. They're not very good at these things nowadays. So you don't know when it's going to come. You're hoping it's instant delivery. In some cities like New York, you can order Amazon in the morning and somebody on a bicycle will deliver it in the afternoon. That's like almost instant karma or instant karma kanda. So a lot of the religion is talking about how encouraging the masses to be pious, and the Vedas are no different. Do things according to rules and regulations. Be, in essence, a good citizen. If you're a good citizen, you get all kinds of rights and privileges. You're protected by the government. You can go where you want. But let's say you're not a good citizen and you end up on a place, I'll pick just a random place, Rikers Island. So you end up on Rikers Island and you have much less freedom. You have some freedom. You could still try to be a decent person, but your freedoms are highly restricted. When Prabhupada went to Moscow early on during the Cold War with American disciples, wherever he went, somebody was following him. And if he used the phone to call Professor Katowski, I'm sure somebody was listening in on the line. And though Prabhupada accomplished what he wanted when he was there, he said, I don't like this place. If I want to stay in my room, I can do that. But I don't like that I have no choice. He had no freedom. There's very few places he was allowed to go, someone always following him. He said that lack of freedom is not very good. So in a similar way, when we get to Rikers Island, there's some freedom, but a lot less freedom. So karma kanda means, or the flowery language of the Vedas or every religion is saying, okay, we can give you some help to avoid getting sent to the equivalent of Rikers Island. But Krishna here is saying, if you do that, you're kind of stupid. Now, that's not Krishna's exact words. I'm paraphrasing. Krishna says, men of small knowledge or women of small knowledge are very much attracted to flowery words of the Vedas, which recommend various fruitive activities. So maybe you can go to heaven or get a good birth, get power, get this, get that. And they say that's all there is. So Krishna is saying, avoid the flowery language of Vedas, which are in the Vedas and in every religion. It's there because it provides a certain piety. Now, there's a wonderful story by Dostoevsky, and it was called, it's a section of a book, and the section is called The Grand Inquisitor. Has anybody here read The Grand Inquisitor? Anybody read it? The Grand by Dostoevsky, the Russian writer, very good writer. I was, Satyananda Swami was visiting a few years ago. I actually hadn't read it. I've read much of Dostoevsky, but that wasn't one I had read. And there's a beautiful spring that flows out of the ground and goes miles through a forest. And the water all year round is 68 degrees. So it's the middle of a hot summer. And we went and got tubes and we're floating down this river. This river is so mystical. That is probably the fountain of youth, which Ponce de Leon was looking for. One devotee died in the river. And the moment she died, a heart attack, the largest rainbow the other devotees were with her they've ever seen appeared on the sky that exact moment. Very kind of mystical place. So Satyananda Swami and I were taking a little break and floating down. And he told me the story of the Grand Inquisitor because it was relevant for our discussion. If you like, I'll share you the brief version of the story. In the Grand Inquisitor, you don't know where it takes place, but it looks like it's medieval Spain. And during that time, the church is very powerful, and the government and everything is in order, and people know what they're supposed to do and not supposed to do. Society is working. And in the middle of it, Jesus reappears. And when Jesus reappears, he's going around and giving love to everyone. He's not preaching, just by acts of kindness and goodness. And people are just, their whole heart is melting and they're changing in the presence of Jesus. And then the authorities arrest him and put him in jail. And the Grand Inquisitor comes, I guess you might say the boss of some kind. And he comes to question him. And he understood this is really Jesus. He says, "Why have you come?" He says, "I've come because people are just following the rules and rituals," as Krishna's talking here. But they're not getting love. And the Grand Inquisitor then chastises him. Very severely. He says, everything is in order. The church is the authority. People listen to what they say. Society works. Everyone knows their role. Everyone knows their place. And everything's going smoothly. If you introduce all this love, it will disrupt the whole hierarchy we have, and things will be chaos. And then the Grand Inquisitor kisses him on every cheek and gives, Jesus then kisses the Grand Inquisitor on each cheek and gives him love. A little bit of a satire story, but the idea is that if everyone follows the rules and rituals, which never happens anyway, but if they did, you have some order, but you don't have love, the heart doesn't change. And Dostoevsky recognized this. The same point Krishna is making in the Gita. And Dostoevsky makes the same point, probably, I think he wrote this 150 years ago, something like that. So now we'll move on to today's verse. Here we are. In the minds of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence and are bewildered by such things, the resolute determination, devotional service to Supreme Lord does not take place. In other words, if your mind is too attached to things like karma kanda, doing what you can do to enjoy this world, you can have trouble taking up devotional service, bhakti yoga. Now, this is very contradictory because on one hand, the Vedas or the Torah or the New Testament or the Quran, all the same. They are all saying, please follow these rules and regulations. We'll have a better society. You have these restrictions. You're better off. The Muslims will say, don't drink. The Christians used to say, don't eat meat on Fridays. The Catholics used to say, the Jews will say, well, you ought to be kosher. And the Hindus will say their thing. They're all saying these things. They're all pious things. They're not bad things. They're all reasonable principles. But what's missing? Krishna is saying, we're just regulating the sense gratification. Why? So they can enjoy more. Because if you don't regulate your sense gratification, you burn out and you end up enjoying less. For example, if I really want to have the highest experience of sense gratification right now, I can go to the right part of town and roll down my window and hand somebody some money, and they're going to give me some drugs that will make me go swooning in temporary ecstasy. And then when the drug wears off, I find myself all bloodied and a mess. I didn't even know what happened to me. And then I'm addicted. And then it creates a horrible, vicious cycle. So that's an extreme example. The idea being that sense gratification isn't going to take us there. So what will take us there? So Krishna then discusses the Vedas deal with it mainly, not entirely, mainly with the subject of the modes of nature. Rise above these modes. And then Krishna says, just as all the purposes served by a small pond can at once be served by a great reservoir of water, all the purpose of Vedas can be served if one understands the purpose behind it. And again, it's the Vedas, it's the Talmud, it's the Bible, it's the Quran. It doesn't make a difference. So Krishna is advising Arjuna, just be steadfast in yoga. This is a section on Bhakti Yoga. Be steadfast in your yoga. And if you perform your duty and abandon all attachment to success or failure, I'm doing my duty because I'm supposed to, such evenness of mind is called yoga. Now, later on in, I think, chapter 16 or 17, and again in 18, Krishna gets into this in detail. So this is a summary. Remember, the whole Gita is a 30-minute conversation. So this is a summary of a summary. So what's going on here is Krishna saying, just do your duty, but be detached. If we do something because we're supposed to do it, Krishna later on explains that's called action in goodness, because we're doing what we're supposed to do. If we're doing something for our own gain, that's motive passion. And if we're not doing what we're supposed to do, that's ignorance. I'll give you an example. Let's say somebody is suffering. One devotee here has COVID. So he's suffering. So I think, oh, he's suffering so much. Let me bring him some hot soup. It might help. So I'm doing it not for any benefit for me. I'm doing it because I'm supposed to help people, I'm supposed to do good for others. Let's say I bring him the soup and I say to him, and now that I brought you the soup, will you please post on Facebook that I brought you soup so people know how wonderful I am? That is acting in a mode of passion. And let's say I really have some soup and I know he needs it and I don't bring it. That's the mode of ignorance. So later on, Krishna discusses all this detail. Again, we're in the summary chapter. So Krishna discusses now work. What you work out of detachment, but you do what you're supposed to do. And Krishna says very beautifully, the wise engage in devotional service, free themselves from the cycle of birth and death. How? By renouncing the fruits of action in the world. In other words, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do because I'm supposed to do it. It's my duty. Now, how do we know what our duty is? Some of you may ask that. This is the summary chapter that comes later in the Gita. And then to conclude this part of the section, Krishna says, we began with discussing the flowery language of the Vedas. Flowery language is in every scripture. We're talking Vedas, doesn't make a difference. When your mind is no longer disturbed by the flowery language and remains fixed, then you will have attained divine consciousness. So rise above all this. Then Arjuna says, what are the symptoms of one whose conscience is thus merged? How does he walk? How does he talk? How does he sit? What does he look like? How do I know who has got there? So anyway, we're going to stop and pause here and see if there are any questions, comments, criticisms, good jokes. Let's see. Anybody, you can unmute and ask, or you can put something in chat. tell me what you would like. Anybody have any questions or comments on these thoughts? Is anybody here feel that I can think of a question? Well, does this mean I should give up all religious rituals? Rise above the flowery language of Vedas. Should I give up all religious rituals? Is that what Krishna is advocating? That would be the natural question that would come to me. So now that I've asked the question, somebody else has to answer it.
I think that we have to renounce the benefits that we get from, or expected benefits of, opulence, wealth, power, pleasures. I think that's the renunciation. I think that's what he does.
So we say we renounce it. Okay.
Because we do the religious rituals, but we don't expect, and this is something, this is something that goes with my Christian friends, also with Christian people I know, is that, well, what do you expect from God? I mean, he's supposed to give you something. And they think God is like Santa Claus, that if you do this and that, he will bring you a toy or something like that, as a big childish idea of expecting things from your rituals or from your prayers or whatever, rather than expecting what he says, opulence, wealth, power, rather than the feeling of doing your job, doing your duty.
Okay, that's good. Should we just see, Krishna is telling Arjuna, don't give up your duty, but change your consciousness. And if we change our consciousness, then we can act in the mood of devotion. Does anybody give an example? Anybody have an example of doing something and then changing their consciousness and doing the same thing? Anybody have that experience? Yes, Atma.
Well, it's not exactly I'm not going to give a personal anecdote, but I was just thinking, let's say, tell me if you think I'm not addressing the point the way you want me to, then I'll stop. But let's say that, like, sometimes you have people probably helping you do your services, and I suppose that occasionally they're not all like devotees of Krishna, and I wouldn't be surprised that because you're the kind of person that you are, that as you direct a person who's working, doing some job for you, getting paid, that you may tell them a thing or two, and maybe one or two of them in the past has become some kind of devotee. So I guess what I'm thinking is, on the one hand, someone's duty working for, so if you have a boss who pays someone to do their job, but the boss on his own time is a devotee of Krishna, the person may do their duty for the boss and get paid. And if he does his job well, then he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. But then maybe one day he learns from his boss, when the boss is sharing something personal about what he really cares about. And then that person starts to become a devotee of Krishna too. So then he's doing his job. He doesn't give up his job, getting paid, doing the work that his boss tells him. He doesn't give that up, but he continues to do it. But now he also is thinking, let my whole life, including my work, ultimately use to serve God, and let me talk about God in my spare time. And then his boss is even more pleased because he's, wow, this guy, he's just as good a worker as he was before, but now he's also, his heart is becoming pure, and he's offering some of the money that he earns to help do things for God and so forth. Anyway, so Sorry, it wasn't a personal example, but
No,
that's
that's fine.
what
I
it came to my mind.
I like that. It's very good. Very, very good. I it's a interesting point of how uh, our conscious affects things. I'll give an example myself. I have breakfast every Saturday with the mayor, longstanding commitment. And there's several of us meet, but I'm the one that organizes it. And every Saturday, sit and discuss city affairs. Now, um, everyone in Gainesville knows I'm a member of a weird cult. I mean, okay. Actually, because we've been giving out prasadam on the campus for this summer, will be 50 years. And there's 1,000 devotees in the area. It's probably one of the most favorable places in America. Very, very favorable. So I don't broadcast, I don't wear my religion on my sleeve. But what I do is, why am I invited there? Because they, the community leaders believe that I can add a piece of wisdom. So I don't say much. And Prabhupada used to say, we want to teach by example, not precept. We're very much inclined to tell people what they should do, but not set the example ourselves. So I try to uh, pray and in my own mind be very Krishna conscious, but not in this environment. It's very, very important people I'm with, not wear it on my sleeve, but be there for the wisdom that only by devotional practice could I have. It's not my own acumen that gives it to me. Now, um, uh, I had a very interesting experience with Radhanath Swami back in the 80s. And it's very telling for me about him and presenting Krishna. Radhanath Swami was I had a little program. My wife and I had a program in Ohio, a college program we were doing, and he would visit us on his college tour. And he told me that he went to Kent State and he was doing cooking classes. Now, at that time, Kent State was very strict. No religious activity will be on campus sanctioned events. They want to be neutral. Not sure that's even legal nowadays, but that was what their edict was in the 80s. So Radhanath Swami showed up. He's in a dhoti, but giving cooking classes. And when he showed up, it was like this. Some Christians came there and wanted to get him thrown off campus. So they came like this. They had a book in their hand, not a Gita. And they would say, so tell us what your religion is. What's your philosophy? What do you believe? And they'd hold the book right next to him, the book with the hidden microphone. It was as if the Three Stooges were trying to do it. It was so absurd the way they were doing it. It was obvious they had a hidden microphone in the book. And so they would go and say, what is your philosophy? What is your religion? Well, what are you doing? He'd say, I'll tell you my philosophy. My philosophy is to not add too much salt to the vegetable. Because you put too much salt, the whole vegetable's ruined. You really got to be real careful how much salt you put in it. That's my philosophy. And then I want to cook it just right because I'm giving a cooking class. No, we want to know what you believe. Well, I believe a little bit of pepper is really good for the vegetable. And they were just playing him like this. And Radhanath Swami is very, very smart. So immediately understood what was going on. So he went along with it. After a month, he wouldn't preach at all. After a month, they stopped coming. Then something very interesting happened. The other students who were coming, who were really attracted, learned how to cook a meal. Radhanath Swami would do a little offering, but he wouldn't say what he was doing. And then they would have a feast. And finally, after about a month or two of this, the student said, look, And the Christians are gone by now. Look, you're cooking these meals. You're not telling us anything. We demand to know. We absolutely demand it. What's your philosophy? And then when he told them, they were a wide open audience, so receptive and just ready to hear. So he came to our place in Worcester, Ohio, and he said, look, I'm going to tell you, I learned just recently how to preach on campus. Don't. Just give. Just give them. In this case, it was prasadam. Just be very giving, because students are very leery of proselytizers. He said, Krishna taught me at Kent State how to approach people on campus. And that's the secret of approaching them. Just give, give, give. And eventually they're going to want to know, how can you be such a giving person? What drives you? Where does it come from? And then, well, if you insist, I'll share a little something with you. And then people are really, really ready to listen. So that impacted me greatly in how I interact with people, that story. It stuck with me all these decades. So again, it takes us back to what Prabhupada said. The example was more important than the precept being what we're saying. The example we're giving as a person, our being. And with that being, then people will listen to us. There's one financial service company, I forgot which one it is now, but when so-and-so speaks, everyone listens. They advertise. Anybody know which one that is? I've seen their billboards, but I don't remember. But when so-and-so speaks, JP Morgan or who knows?
Merrill Lynch.
What is it?
Merrill Lynch.
Merrill Lynch, okay. When Merrill Lynch speaks, everyone listens. So because they're trying to present that Merrill Lynch has gravitas, has credibility, even if they cheated everyone, almost went bankrupt in 2008. But they're trying to present the image, the optics. We have gravitas. We can be trusted. We're really there. And so when we do speak, we don't say much. People will listen. So I saw that with Prabhupada. When Prabhupada would go to some functions, he would speak a lot. Other functions, he would say a few words and just chant. Depends on which function he's at. Now, how do we know what is appropriate for the audience? Well, I'm not Prabhupada. I'm not so advanced. That's why when I begin a class in which there's only a dozen or 24 people, I ask everyone, who are you? What's going on? As Ram Baru puts it brilliantly, she coined this phrase, as devotees, we are radical personalists. I was attending a seminar today for the Bhaktivedanta Institute. One of our colleagues runs a very interesting laboratory in Princeton. Now, this laboratory studies the interaction of mind and machines, if you can believe it. And there's a project at Princeton University, and she was a keynote speaker at our major BI conference 2 years ago, and we've become good friends. So she has a gathering every month or so. So I tend and listened in, and she has a very good speaker from the Galileo Institute. Now, this institute is trying to contend that consciousness is not material. And they introduced a concept that I like so much. I'm going to use this concept now. They said in modern times, we have amputated metaphysics. Now, physics means the study of matter. Metaphysics is that's beyond matter, consciousness. And modern science can't explain consciousness. As David Chalmers says, it's the hard problem of physics. But it's often amputated. So the speaker was speaking about that. Unfortunately, his final conclusion was we have to get beyond personhood to the impersonal essence within everyone. Kind of the same thing Dr. Radha Krishna had concluded in his Gita, something that Prabhupada pointed out was quite different than the mood of the Gita. So the idea that consciousness is beyond matter is becoming very prominent. There are so many groups of major scientists, physicists, biologists, chemists who are starting to recognize that. There are dangers in personalism. I'll show you this at the BI now. I might have showed this picture before, but I'll do it again. We now have a new world headquarters. You can see the picture. That's in Gainesville, Florida. That's our
Yes.
headquarters. And we have a huge library that's been donated by various professors, and we're still fixing it up and making it a retreat center where we can explore the intersection of consciousness and science. So I'm going to stop here and see what other questions you might have, or comments, or additions, subtractions, or reflections, something somebody learned tonight. Anybody want to share anything? I'll give you a moment to think. You don't have to.
Bill, on what you were talking about, I work in food distribution. I volunteer to distribute food to people who are needy. And there was a point when I was doing it for an organization that will eventually recognize me. But then I realized that this recognition was really not important, and that I will do for one of the branches. I will do it without recognition or without record for them without, but also also the fact that you can take any fruits and vegetables you want, and that seems and that really getting paid with fruits and vegetables is so difficult. So this is I think is in the vein of what you're talking about. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Anybody else have any comments or any questions on subjects related to today's class, or a question semi-related? What is on your mind? Be careful, I might call on you.
Okay, before you call on anybody, I thought the story that you told about Radhanath Swami was very interesting, and I guess this the concept about giving and giving and giving, and then let them come to you. I guess that obviously it won't work every time, but are you talking more about sort of having Krishna consciousness have that reputation of being like not forcing anything down your throat, which of course they don't do, but I'm just wondering, like, the concept of giving that he used, he was using it to avoid conflict because of the people that were coming after him, or I'm not right.
No, you got it right. I mean, it's not one size fits all. In some places, we may be much more aggressive in our presentation, and Prabhupada said we should always do it nicely. He said, you recognize a Vaishnav because they're ladies and gentlemen. That's very important. So ladies and gentlemen don't see us as cheaters. At the same time, I gave an example of being low key because that was that particular audience. Being low key was the best way to present Krishna to that audience. In a different audience, it might be very different. So it's time, place, and the details of the circumstance that matter. So in this chapter, Krishna says, how do we know what to do? Well, again, this is a summary chapter, more detail later, but Krishna says a few verses behind where I just read, one who restrains his senses and fixes his conscience upon me is known as a man or woman of steady intelligence. So when you have steady intelligence, then you know, and Krishna says it in this very chapter, what to do and what not to do. Sometimes Prabhupada would be a lamb and sometimes a lion. When in doubt, because we're not Prabhupada, better we cool it a little. But there's a time to be a lamb and a time to be a lion. And when we control our senses, we get that very steady intelligence. So, yes, Atmaji.
This is a very interesting subject, and one that I do contemplate time to time. I think like you said, it's not one size fit all, and there's two points I kind of take from that story. On the one hand, the point is, in certain situations, the best approach, depending on the people, is kind of zip it and just be really just do things that they appreciate by your just being a good person and appreciating them, and then they'll inquire from you. So on the one hand, it's a nice tactic. The other thing I take from it is whether you utilize that tactic or you don't utilize that tactic, but you utilize, as you described, a more aggressive, go for it with explaining the difference between spirit and matter and help people to recognize the difference. And some things are bad, some things are good, go for it. But the point is, whether you use that tactic or the other one, what's your consciousness like? So if your consciousness in both situations should be that you're very giving. So being very giving in your heart and appreciating others and putting their interest above your own. If you're doing it like that, then if you choose whether you choose the aggressive tactic or the other tactic where you kind of don't, where you're just teaching by example, but not teaching literally with your words, they can both be very effective. And then here's just, why not just give another kind of story where it's kind of very different, but it just shows. So there's different strokes for different folks and different tactics and different situations. So one story that Subhangada, who's who's here with me now, reminded me of is there was several years back, maybe a decade ago, Indradyumna Swami, who's I suppose his chanting is delightful and super blissful. When he speaks, he's pretty direct. I love that as well. And so he was invited to give a talk at a local campus in the New York City metropolitan area. And the devotee who invited him after the program, before the program said, these are new people and we're kind of laying low, and we're not, and then but Indradyumna Swami, he explained he really went deep into the why you should be Krishna conscious, what's problematic with not following Krishna consciousness, and even describe habits that are favorable to Krishna consciousness and those that aren't, and we know for, I think I'm looking at the board, all the names here. I think pretty much everyone knows there's 4 regular principles like that in Prabhupada's books that he described. So Indradyumna Swami even went to that point. And then the devotee who invited him after the program said, well, Maharaj, I thought we were laying low. And Maharaj said, yeah, I know. I was thinking, I agreed with you before the program, but then when I saw these people, I thought, this may be some of these people, we may never see them in this lifetime again. So I wanted to tell them everything about Krishna. But the point is that Maharaj, he's such a nice devotee, so compassionate. He's like, he's one of my favorite devotees. And I very much favor devotees who teach by precept rather than words as well. But I love him. And I think, so the point is that he used that tactic in that situation, or often, but in that situation, certainly. But because his consciousness, it's hard to find anything negative about, his motivation when he's speaking, that I think is very effective too. So anyway, just to share that, and sort of, I don't think it's devil's advocate, because I mean, you mentioned yourself, Brahmatirtha, right? There's, sometimes we use one tactic, sometimes we use another. The most important thing is what's your consciousness when you're doing it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Indradumna Swami. I go on his Brikram. We just corresponded a few weeks ago, and I'm a big fan of his presentation. And time, place, and circumstance, and he can understand, and he's very good at sizing up his audience. What can they take? On one hand, I gave the example where Radhanath Swami was forced to hold back, and it worked. And there's other cases where we can be more aggressive, and that's what's needed. And that's what really helps people. Thank you. Boy, you finally snapped me out of it. People need that. So it's a matter of us being, to use the modern terminology, mindful, aware of two things. Aware of what's our ego and what's our inspiration, and aware of our audience, what's best for them. And if we're really thinking, I want to do the best thing for these people, I want to give them something that lasts them, then we will figure out what's too little and what's too much. There's two dangers: giving somebody too much where you blow them away, and giving them too little where you've held back what they really need. So what you're pointing out, Atma, is in this case, Indradumna Swami was advised, don't do too much. And he looked at the audience and said, they're ready. I'm giving it to them. He understood that. He understood it. And it's a real art. Prabhupada used to say, sometimes Prabhupada would do things, and then he'd turn to us and say, but you can't do that. I can get away with it because I'm an old man. and so we have to act again according to the three principles of time and place and the circumstances that we're dealing with, and then decide. I'm glad you balanced it though with that story from Indradumna Swami. It's nowadays you cannot go into a bookstore or even the magazine rack at the checkout of the supermarket without seeing an article on mindfulness. You can't go anywhere without it. I will, mindfulness, what does it mean? I'll tell you a mindfulness story. I might have told this before, but it's one that's very impressive. One, Hari Dayanand Raj shared this story with me. Back in the 70s, he was going for a walk every day to Juhu Beach from the Juhu Temple construction site. Has anybody heard this story before about it? Okay, so he's going every day to the beach, and there's a half a dozen devotees walking with Prabhupada. It's always the same devotees every day. And halfway from the Jew Hare Krishna land to the beach, there's a tall building, 10, 12 stories, something like that. So as they're walking, Prabhupada stops in front of the building and he goes, where is he? And the devotees look around thinking, well, it's 6 of us. We're all here. Maybe Prabhupada didn't see somebody who was behind him from the group. And Prabhupada said, we're all here, Prabhupada, same group as yesterday. And Prabhupada goes, where is he? And maybe we missed somebody. It's all the same, Prabhupada. It's just us. And Prabhupada goes, where is he? And devotees are absolutely bewildered. And Prabhupada sees that, finally says, every day we walk by this building, and the man on the 12th story is always on the balcony. Today he's not there. That's called mindfulness. Prabhupada was aware of the world, keenly aware, and also very keenly in his inner meditation on his japa beads on the holy name. He could do both. And he realized, and none of the other devotees would have even known that there was someone every day on the balcony. He didn't say anything to them. None of them had any idea there was somebody standing there. Prabhupada was keenly aware. And I've seen that in my own experience, keenly aware. As nowadays, then we would say keenly aware. Nowadays, we say mindful. That's what really mindfulness means. We're aware of what's going on, and we're aware of ourselves and our own desires and our own prejudices. It's a great test any one of you can take. I guarantee you won't pass this test. I've never seen anyone do it yet. It's called the implicit bias test. You just Google implicit bias Harvard. It's a 10 or 15-minute test. You can pick what you like. You can pick any minority or any group you want. There's a test for it. And it's very, very clever because you can't fake it. And you say, oh, I have an implicit bias, maybe against this group or that group or this orientation or that. I have an implicit bias. And we all have it. And it's just natural, the way we're brought up, our upbringing, our backgrounds, our experiences. And as a devotee, we believe in the opposite, though, samadarshana. So how do we reconcile that we all have implicit bias, but we believe in samadarshana, sama equal darshana vision, that we're seeing everyone as a devotee of Krishna. We're seeing everyone as spirit soul, even if they're very fallen. We're seeing everyone that way. And at the same time, we have our own prejudices. Interesting dilemma. What do we do with this? Well, this morning, Radhanath Swami gave a brilliant talk at the Bhakti Center by Zoom. And in the talk this morning, he said something that's very difficult for me. He says, somebody asked him this question: what if you're walking down the street, and this devotee was some kind of minority. I was listening, not seeing, so I don't know what. He said, somebody insults us. Like right now, people in New York and other cities are attacking Asians. You know, somehow our former president convinced people that anyone from China is bringing COVID or something stupid like that. So, so Asians are getting attacked. When I grew up, it was, you didn't want to be a black in the South. And I grew up in New Jersey. So the golf course behind where I lived, town was half Jewish and Catholic, but no Jews or Catholics could play in this golf course. It was common then. You had to be what's called a WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, to join. This is New Jersey. This is not in the deep South. That was very common. And it was just considered absolutely normal.
Which part of New Jersey?
Excuse me? I didn't hear you.
Which part of New Jersey, Prabhu?
Springfield, North Jersey. There was once a story, a bumblebee went to an outdoor bar mitzvah, and he came back to the hive wearing a skull cap, looking Jewish. And the other bee said, why are you looking Jewish? Why are you doing that? And he said, because when I was at this outdoor bar mitzvah, picking up all the nectar from the food, I didn't want them to think I was a wasp. Okay, so.
I do have another.
Okay, let me just finish this one point very quickly. So So there's all these, we have this feeling of that we want equal vision, known in Sanskrit as Sarma Darshana. The Gita strongly advocates we look at the dog eater, which is very low, the Brahmin, the elephant, they're all spirit soul. We see them the same. At the same time, we have our implicit bias. And then Radhanath Swami was asked this morning, what do I do when someone walks by me and just spits at me or attacks me because of my bodily features? Maybe I'm this minority or that minority, or what do I do? Or maybe it's a majority and another minority is attacking them. So Radhanath Swami gave an answer, very brilliant. He said, you have to understand that that person is a suffering person, that they would just attack you for no reason because you don't look like them means they are the most insecure person you can imagine, and they're internally suffering. All you can do is feel sorry for them. But you just have to feel sorry. Boy, there's a spirit soul that's so covered. And it was interesting. One time, Bhakti Tirtha Swami went to Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, some people in your movement are prejudiced, he was African American, against blacks. And Prabhupada said, that's their Maya, to be in such bodily concept. And then Prabhupada said amazing words, and that's your Maya to be bothered by it. So it's a matter of, we have our internal bias, and mindfulness in this case means recognizing it. Yeah, we do have it. We do have an internal bias, and we recognize that internal bias, and therefore by recognizing it, we don't act upon it. I do a lot of mediations for ISKCON. And when I do, I walk in, and I do mediations for the city and other mediations to keep in practice for my ISKCON mediations. So let's say I'm doing a mediation in court, and one guy walks in with a suit and tie, very clean cut. Another guy walks in very slovenly looking. Now, immediately, I'm going to favor one guy over the other. So immediately I have to catch myself from recognizing, no, I can't judge a book by its cover. So I'm aware of my own prejudices. That's what mindfulness means for a devotee. We're aware of it so that we can reach the point of equal vision. Okay, there was one more question that I think I'm running out of time.
This is Laja. So my question is, you mentioned that you have a monthly breakfast with the mayor of Gainesville.
Yes.
This is just a real tangential question. I know that there are some cities and even some states that are not favorable towards Krishna consciousness, and Gainesville has really kind of exploded as a Krishna consciousness city to go to. And I was just wondering if that might have anything to do with your relationship with the mayor.
It has everything to do with it. He's very favorable. Plus, I have a personal relationship with him. He decided to run for mayor in my living room. That didn't hurt. I have a personal relationship. I'm the political liaison between the large Krishna community and the political structure. I didn't intend to do it, but Krishna put me in that position through an odd quirk of fate. So when it comes time for zoning or other things, I'm the liaison person. So I like that. I get to deal with important people, and they get to appreciate devotee on a personal basis. Okay, with that, I think we'll stop here. Are there anything else? Atma, Prabhu, I love just seeing you at these programs, let alone hear you speak. What's next now?
Thanks a lot, Prabhu. You definitely, aside from the fact that I became blissful from the most important thing is I became blissful by and my mind, I became deeper than I would have been otherwise by, in thinking about these lofty subject matters. So thank you for that. I also thank you for two one-liner jokes that I never heard before that were outstanding. the Patel manufacturers and the B not wanting the others to think that he's a wash. Those are just, those are amazing. So,
and just to show that I am an equal opportunity person, it is Passover now among the Jews and Good Friday among the Christians, which is Jesus observing the Passover Seder. So one time, a rabbi was sitting on a bench with a blind man sitting next to him, eating his matzah, the unleavened bread that Jews eat during Passover with a rough surface and all. And the blind man says, "What is that?" So the rabbi hands him a piece of matzah. And 5 minutes later, the blind man turned to him and said, "Who wrote this garbage?" Okay, no. I had to give one thing for the season. One for the season. It's the season, Good Friday, Passover. You had to have one for that.
I never heard that one either. It's
okay. So, yeah. With Prabhupada, it was funny when Prabhupada was with his god brothers. It was mostly in Bengali, but what were they doing? So I asked some devotees who understood Bengali. They were joking with each other, very jovial. Prabhupada's god brothers all had funny nicknames for each other.
Really?
Now, not that we should abuse people. We should be careful this way. These are great sadhus, but when they were together, they were very jovial, and they even had nicknames for each other because they're personal. We could easily abuse that privilege, so we'd have to be cautious. But that's what Prabhupada did. So we should be happy in Krishna consciousness. Okay, thank you very much. Everyone have a good evening. I do have to go to another program now, so I'm going to let you continue, Atma, whatever you do.
Okay. If everyone likes to unmute themselves just for a second to thank Brahmatirtha and also his wife Bhakti, who's accompanying him, and I'm sure I'm sure she loved the class I did, but she's also supporting him by being here, and she's a very. So to honor both of them, please join me expressing appreciation.
For her, she heard all these jokes already. She was suffering badly, very badly. She's a trooper.
Okay, so everyone, you can unmute yourself. Brahmatirtha Prabhu ki jai.
Yes, Brahmatirtha.